Time to talk up some Florida football here at the Voice of College Football. We got Bob Redman on the line from Guide to Greater Gainesville. He's been covering Florida football for a long, long time, and we are looking forward to the conversation. Bob, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Appreciate you being here. And of course, Florida's going to break the trend and do a Thursday night spring game, which we can all look forward to in about a week. Bob, let's start with the quarterback position. That's where most people like to start. And of course, we've got Anthony Richardson coming off an injury, but seems to be full go and getting all the reps in during this spring session.
Yeah, I think that's where it starts and ends, honestly, with Florida this year. I think the success of Florida is going to revolve around the quarterback play, and Anthony is the guy who's led the pack. It was expected. Emory Jones stuck around a little while during spring, and then about a week or so in, he decided that he was ready to transfer out. So Anthony, the big surprise there is that he's actually going this spring, and not necessarily that he's practicing at all, but as much as he's practicing. And he, they're not allowing contact on quarterbacks, which every coach that's been through here in a long time has done that. So you kind of don't get. We don't get to watch much anyway, but I've got eyeballs on practice watching. But you kind of don't get the sense that he can utilize all his tools, which certainly running with the football is a big part of his game. In terms of if the play breaks down, he can take off and do some really, really big things. That's something that really caught the attention of fans last year with him. So, he's performed well. I think he's got a lot to learn. It's a new system, with new coaching staff coming in, and that's been a thing. So, he just has a lot to learn, and he's soaking it in. I think it's starting to get better for him as far as that goes. But I really think you just don't get the real Anthony Richardson until he's out there and everything's flying around him and he can make a move and bust off a 50-yard run to go along with a really terrific arm that probably needs a little bit more seasoning in terms of accuracy and that kind of thing. But and Jack Miller is a guy they brought in from Ohio State who's right behind him. I think right now and doing well, actually progressing pretty good right as of late. And so I think right now it's a 2-horse race at that position, and Anthony's out front.
All right. So you ended your dissertation there on what I was going to hit on next, whether you thought that this was a legitimate battle between Miller and Richardson.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody thinks that's going to be the case in the end. But I think it's more along the lines of, Richardson's had his issues. He's had hamstring. He came to school with an MCL. I don't know what you would call it. I guess a slight tear, and he's played through it in his 2 years here. But he missed a lot of games last year because he just was hurt. And so, what happens if he goes down? I think you need another guy. I think that Richardson is the guy. Maybe Miller can be some kind of a change-up, if you will, and they play him a good that he could win the job. But I think most people and I believe that Richardson's probably the guy.
Now, Bob, Emory Jones, of course, was highly touted coming out of high school, led the nation in interceptions with 13 last year, a bit of a roller coaster ride in his one season, but he had been grooming for quite some time under Kyle Trask and others leading into the 2021 season. And to be fair to him, there was a lot of instability around him while he was trying to progress last season. So him being as highly touted as he was, how do you compare and contrast Anthony Richardson? Does he have an even fifth gear to go into beyond what Emory Jones shows us?
Yeah, I think you make a good point as far as comparing. I think what we've seen athletically as far as his legs, and Emory actually was a pretty good runner. He led the team in rushing last year. I think he had like I don't remember if it was 700 or 800 yards. He led the team in rushing. So he could run the ball between the tackles. Anthony, though, is just, I mean, the guy does standing backflips and all kinds of crazy stuff like that you shouldn't do when you have an MCL tear, but he does it anyway. But he also has he has a really nice arm, a good arm, and I think Emery did to a certain extent, but he was kind of limited in some of his. He was not a touch passer at all, and I think Anthony can be a touch passer, and he needs a. We'll get to the receivers, I'm sure, in a little bit, but he needs a couple of targets more to be able to hit and be more effective. Whether he reads the field, I think that's the progression he's going through right now in learning the offense. And I'm not actually eyeballing it at practice. I'm just hearing from the sources that I have, and so we'll figure out where he's at in reading his progressions as we go.
We appreciate Bob Redmond being here, breaking down Florida football for us. You can catch his work at guidetogreatergainesville.com. Bob, when we look at the running back position, of course, they lose a ton of experience with Malik Davis and Pierce. Damian Pierce is gone off to the NFL. But you mentioned before we started to record the 2 5-stars, of course, DeMarcus Bowman from Clemson, Lorenzo Lingard from Miami. People have to be jacked up and excited to see these guys finally cut it loose.
Yeah, those two guys are definite game breakers. They're different. Bowman's a little bit smaller. I wouldn't call him small, but he's a little smaller, but more elusive, if you will. And Lingard is just a jet, fastest guy on the team, probably strong. He's really strong. He's the strongest of the running backs. But he's a guy that needs a nice crease to just fly through, and where Bowman can make something out of nothing. And then they brought in Montrell Johnson, who ran for 800 plus yards and 12 touchdowns last year for Louisiana as well. So he's a sophomore. And so honestly, their backfield is pretty nice. Naquan Wright was the third leading rusher at Florida last year in a backfield that they really shared the carries. And, but he tore his ACL at the end of the year. He's actually running a little bit, doing a little bit of drills, but they won't allow him to do any contact at all right now because of the knee recovering. So, but he's coming along, and so they actually have four strong backs right now that are going through spring, at least to some extent. And I think that's a really exciting room. I think for this offense, as much as they need Anthony Richardson to do big things, I think they need the running backs to do big things as well.
The wide receiver core was so stacked with layers upon layers. And if you throw Kyle Pitts into the mix a couple of years ago, Kadarius Toney, Tyree Cleveland, and others, but the cupboard seems to be, I'm not going to say bare by any stretch of the imagination, but maybe not up to Florida's standards.
Yeah, I think I just think I think their outside guys are solid. I think they have a solid group of receivers. I don't think they have a real difference maker right now. That's what we had last year pretty much. They're just nothing. There's not a guy that you can get to the ball to in the short field and him turn around and really make a big play. I mean, Pitts could do that all day long, and Kadarius Toney could do that. They don't have that guy. They didn't have him last year. So it's, that's been, they have elite size. All the guys are like 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", if you will. It's, all of them are that way, and some of them can run on the outside, but those real game breaking guys that can make plays, zipping around the field and through defenders, I don't know if they have that right now. They're searching for that, and I think that's a spot where they may try to go and find somebody in the portal if they can, the transfer portal. They were looking for that in the early part of the transfer portal, and they missed on a big time kid from, I think, Wyoming. I can't remember at this point, but anyway, that's what they need. That they need to find a guy in the portal to help them with that situation.
Got Bob Redmond on the line breaking down Florida football for us. You can join his work at guidetogreatergainesville.com. So, Bob, when you look at the entire team in regards to both offense, defense, special teams, and of course, you've covered some of these concerns already. Give us both ends of the spectrum in terms of standout guys this spring, but also maybe some areas on the team in addition to the wide receiver position that you already covered that you've got some concerns about.
Well, right now they're super banged up at tight end. They've had one guy left the team for medical reasons. They had two others that are injured. I think they're both shoulder injuries or both arm or shoulder injuries. So kind of quirky thing there. And then they had to move two defensive guys over to tight end to help there. So that's a position right now, 2 years removed from Kyle Pitts. That's just in a whole different scenario. They had Kamora Gamble who transferred out at the end of last season. So, I mean, he was a starter last year and he's gone. So it's a big changeover in that room and they're searching for things. I think Louisiana, they use the tight end, but not very much. They put them on the field, but they're not huge targets for them. Their numbers, receptions were pretty low. So, that's a spot I think they really like their starting offensive line, and they actually have probably two guys behind the starters that are pretty strong. But beyond that, I think they need to find another one or two guys that can make sure that they have 8 or 9 solid players along the offensive line. If you talk about needs and necessities, and the biggest thing, I think defensive tackle. Gervon Dexter's an all SEC level guy. He came in as a 5-star prospect. This is his 3rd year. Last year, he had 51 tackles from the interior of the defensive line, which is the most in the last 13 years, more than anybody but Jonathan Bullard at that position. And they've had some really good ones like Sharif Floyd and Dominic Easley and guys like that along the way. But he had the second most of any of those guys in the last 13 years. So he's a player, but if he doesn't have somebody next to him, he's going to get double teamed all day. And that's not a good thing. And honestly, they need to find two guys, or they need to figure out with the guys they have on roster who can play next to him, because you need some depth. That's a tough position. You can't just leave guys out there all day and do their thing. I think they're really solid on the edges on defensive line. I think they're actually really good. Honestly, I think they have all SEC talent on both edges. With Brenton Cox has probably played the best of any defender this year. He's listed as basically an outside linebacker, but he's really a pass rusher most of the time. And then I think the most improved unit on the team, as far as what I'm hearing and just the general talk, is probably inside linebacker, which they've recruited pretty well there. They just, for whatever reason, I think it was system based for some reason. But I think that's a room that's really going to improve. Tackling has been just awful for 2+ years at Florida. And that is a position that the Jay Bateman, who came in from North Carolina, is a guy that talked about that the other day. That was their thing when they got here. They said, you guys just got to tackle better, because they're there to make the play. They just don't bring the play, the running, whoever's carrying the ball down. So that's the big thing. And I think the secondary is going to make, I said that linebackers are the most improved, but I guess I would include them necessarily in the back seven and say at that as a group, as a whole group of the back seven is going to be really improved. With Corey Raymond coaching the corners and Patrick Toney, the defensive coordinator, coaching the safeties. I think the communication there is going to be highly improved. Actually just wrote about that. That's going to get posted later today. So, I think when you're talking about strengths of the team, I think running backs have to be up there. If Anthony Richardson is dialed in as far as getting to a second and third read, I think he's got to be way up there. And I think I kind of have to split up the defensive line, but I think the defensive ends are a super strength of this team, with the defensive tackles not being the opposite right now. So that's about where we stand.
And so, Bob, when you weigh it all out and consider the standout SEC talent versus some of the concerns you just outlined, consider the coaching transition and the staff trying to implement culture and everything else, and then look at a schedule that includes a difficult assignment against Utah added to the Florida State game and the typical gauntlet throughout the SEC East, and the LSU game, of course, is always the crossover. It's got like an 8-4 kind of feel to me. Is that a reasonable expectation?
I think that's about right now. I mean, they're going to add, I mean, he's already talked about adding maybe 10 plus in the portal after the spring. So if some unhappy superstar at another team leaves, and comes to Florida, then, things could change. If they find a super slot receiver that all of a sudden that's a huge one. If they can find 2 defensive tackles that were making plays at an SEC level conference, that's a game changer for this. I really think on defense, if they can fill that, if they can plug those holes right there, that position, and really a little bit of depth there, I think the defense is going to be really good. And again, I think they're going to run the ball well. But they have to run the ball well, and then Anthony has to be whatever level. If they get Anthony and the running backs cooking, I think it's a big thing. And if they add a slot receiver to add to the passing game, that's a big thing. So I think there are certain things that can happen, and some of it is already on the roster, like the Anthony and running back thing, and some of it they have to figure out in the portal if they can get. If they get 2 or 3 answers, I think you're talking more than 8 wins. But I think 8 wins is about right.
Bob Redman, guide to GreaterGainesville.com. Join his work right there. Bob, we appreciate you breaking things down, and enjoy the insight.
All right. Thanks for having me.